This is Gotham Investigations, and I'm your host, Jeffrey Giordano. This series, The Mitigation of Mark Sievers. For this episode, we're going to introduce you to one of his mothers, his stepmother, Jenny Weckelman. Jenny is going to take us through a journey of Mark's life, from childhood up onto the trial. What would be contributing factors on a child's upbringing that would drive him to murder later on in life? His mothers, as well as Mark, have proclaimed his innocence all the way up until this point. Watch this episode and you be the judge. This is Gotham Investigations, and my name is Jeffrey Giordano. Some of you know me as my street narcotics name of Gino when I was with the Miami Police Department. This was a case that I was the mitigation specialist on, a case involving Mark Sievers. The mitigation of Mark Sievers. When you do a mitigation, the childhood upbringing is of the utmost importance when you try to piece together of why this crime might have recurred. This is a unique case, as throughout the whole trial and throughout the whole proceedings, Mark Sievers always proclaimed his innocence throughout, even to this day. This is the only case that was put together based on circumstantial evidence. There was no direct DNA evidence. There was no direct text messages indicating that this crime was about to occur. The crime, of course, as you well know, is the murder for hire of Teresa Sievers, a prominent holistic doctor from Bonita Springs. So we have with us today one of the important keys to his upbringing that knows Mark's real story. Her name, Jenny Weckelman. She is the stepmother of Mark Sievers. Jenny, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you, I'm fine.
So how did you first meet Michael's father? Mark's father, Michael.
He was the veterinarian in our small town. St. Louis is a group of villages, and the village that we lived in called Fenton, he was he was the only vet, actually, right in that area for quite a while. So I had taken a friend's dog to him, and I'd been into him professionally that way. But I had a project I was working on to open a pet store, and he helped me with that. He used to run a couple of pharmacies and things, so he had good knowledge of that. So we kind of became friends and colleagues. The pet store was right next to his veterinary practice, so they complemented each other, and that's how we met.
How far did he live from the pet store?
Oh, a good 40-minute drive, something 25, 30 miles.
And how close were
the
you
city.
To his home?
To his home, not close, but to the work location, I just lived a couple miles from that area.
So at that time, when you had the pet store, did you get to meet his children? Did you get to meet Mark? Did you get to meet Stacy? Did you get to meet his other brother Scott?
Yeah. Yes, eventually I did, several years down the road, a few years down the road. So the children would come and help him sometimes. The girls not so much, but the two boys were kind of like twins. They were close in age.
How old was Mark at the time?
I think it was around 9.
Around 9 years old.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And did Michael, Mark's father, did he express to you at any time problems in his relationship that he was having?
No, I just knew from rumors that he was separated from his wife for a couple of years. I mean, eventually, during a relationship.
During your relationship. But first you started out as a friendship. So how long into that friendship did it turn into a relationship?
Oh, a good 2 years, I would say, 2 or 3 years, yes.
So during that 2 years, he was still at the house?
No, actually, he was living in his practice, in the back.
How long into the friendship did you meet Mark and the other siblings?
Well, pretty much at the beginning, I would see them around his practice. They'd come on Saturdays. They had half a day hours on Saturday, and I met the children that way.
Okay. So I remember when we interviewed you during the trial towards the sentencing, you
Hmm.
had said Mark went to Hebrew school with his father. Was that close to the
Yeah.
your shop?
No, it was more closer to their home or somewhere in between, so it wasn't far. But um, when Mike and I started having a relationship that was closer, then yes, then I knew every Sunday would take the children, or Saturdays, I'm sorry, would take the children.
And the sister Stacy, she worked for you at one point, didn't she?
Yes, she needed some activity to keep her focused, and she was about 15, I think, then, something like that, and maybe she was 13, but anyway, I knew there was some issues with her. She was a little rebellious, as teenagers often are. So Mike devised this plan that she should, if she could work for me, that would give her some focus. Which, yeah, we got along real well, and she was a hard worker.
And when did you find out that she was having problems with Michael, Mark's father?
I guess more when Mike and I became a little bit more serious than just friend.
Did you ever learn during that course of time that through maybe even Mark that she was sexually abused by a neighbor?
That was quite some time down the road.
So that was after she was working at the pet store at that.
Yes, after Mike and I were married, after we moved to the Caribbean, it was quite some time into our
After
marriage.
that. So Mark wasn't at home during that time when she was sexually molested.
I don't know, because that would have been before that evidently happened, as I learned later, when she was a lot younger, 9 or something, or 8 or 10, somewhere in there. So, that was some time ago. Mike didn't even know about it until she had been away from home for quite a long time.
So there were times when we had interviewed you before that you would pick up Mark from his home,
Yes, yes, we would always pick him up to bring him for the weekends, and he stayed quite almost every weekend.
and that house had a lot of animals in it.
It did. They
Talking
had
about dogs,
Well, they
cats.
had dogs and a cat, and from time to time there might be another cat or a dog hanging out. So, they were very loved their animals.
And you had described like some urine and feces sometimes when you would come up to the house.
The house was, yes, it was unkept. Uh,
Mark describes he doesn't remember much from his childhood, but one thing he's does remember is like a roach infestation inside of the house.
well, I think Mark didn't know any better. I mean, he'd lived with that his whole life, so it wasn't unusual for him. He didn't make special note of it or ever complain about it, actually.
And did you go with Mark when he went to Hebrew school? Did Scott attend that with him as well?
Yeah, yes, they both attended, and we took them both and picked them up and took them back home.
And the other sister, Connie, is that her name?
My daughter is Connie. That would
Your
be his
daughter is Connie.
stepsister.
Okay.
Yeah, the older sister was Stacy, the oldest, and then Jamie
Then Jamie.
was the next oldest.
Okay, so your daughter, I mean, was she with you at that time? Was she interacting with Mark as well during his upbringing?
Yes, she lived in closer to us, and her father and I shared custody of her as a practical matter. And she would come over on the weekends too. So the younger children, would be together.
Did,
Stacy and Jamie weren't doing their thing because they were older.
did Mark ever express his concerns to you? I know you had mentioned one time he was mad at his father, wanted to make sure that he paid his child support uh, towards Bonnie, his mother. Did he ever express to you concerns at all about the separation of his father?
In what way? You mean that his father was
Like
separated?
that he was hurt inside about the separation?
No, he never really said anything about that.
Because it seemed to me that he was finally getting into the life that he wanted to be in, a stable family, meaning you and Michael started to connect. We had photographs of him on a boat with his father during that time, and the bonding seems like it started to come back together.
Yes, I think that Michael realized that all his life he'd been going to school and doing his thing, and then, he suddenly realized, oh, well, I've got children here and I'm missing out. So, yes, he started to, it's an effort, something, it just doesn't happen. You have to work at it a little bit.
So, what year did you finally get married?
Oh, that was 1980. Yeah.
And then you moved, correct?
Yeah, and about a year or two after that, Mike was having trouble with his eyes. They'd been he'd been using hard contact lenses, and so we were looking for a climate that was sort of better than city life. Anyway, came across this medical school in the Caribbean. A friend of his had checked out, and he said, well, why not just continue my medical training? We'll see how it goes and so forth. So we embarked on that plan. And I said, it'd be a good time for the children to see other parts of the world besides where they live. And we took them.
When did Mark decide to, okay, I want to leave my sisters, my mother? That must have been a big step for him to decide to go with you and Michael to the Caribbean and leave his mother and sisters behind.
I think that he was more excited about it. He was more worried about leaving some of his friends behind. He's getting into high school, junior high school. And so he was more concerned about how he was going to complete his studies. And he wanted to graduate from the same school he'd been going to, although he'd switched from his mother's school district to our school district.
How old was he at this time?
I don't know how old you ever are when you're going to junior high. 6th grade, 7th grade, something like that.
So it seemed like he was kind of excited to get a new life together, some stability with the brother, with you, with Michael. Things started to slowly come together with him. So you moved to this island,
Yes.
and does he stay in communication with his sisters and his mom?
Well, at the time it was a little easier than it is, a little less easy than it is now with cell phones, but yeah, they stayed in contact. They wrote letters and phone calls. We were on a pretty strict budget. It's expensive, and we're still paying for Bonnie's alimony. We're still paying for the children's support to Bonnie, and trying to live at the same time and in a strange place. So we were on a tight budget. So phone calls weren't that frequent, but they wrote letters, and we did homeschooling. We checked out one of the best schools for that in the States before we left, and they shipped books down there, and I tried to be the teacher.
So there was actually an article that you gave it during the course of mitigation that kind of pinpointed that these kids come from a thriving city into a small island, and suddenly they find themselves with not much to do, and it was kind of like they were imprisoned by what do you call it, like solidity. There was nothing around for them to do. They started to get homesick for his girlfriend. Mark Sievers had a girlfriend back in the mainland, and he started to get antsy a little bit. Is that can you tell us a little bit about that?
He started to chafe a little bit at the constraints that, and he felt he was missing out on his high school milestones like the prom and this kind of thing. And he had a girlfriend that he was corresponding with, and so he wanted to go back home.
But eventually he got to go to that prom, didn't he?
Yep, he did.
And was that just a vacation trip, or did he move
No,
back?
he moved back because, we couldn't afford for him to come back and forth, so it was a decision that he had to make. Either, you're going to stay or you're going to go. You're not going to come back and forth.
Very hard to keep a boy turn into a man's hormones from going crazy.
Probably.
In the teens and a prom coming along. But he had some arguments at the time. I remember you mentioning with the father, because he got caught on the telephone a couple times calling his girlfriend up, and
Yeah.
and can you explain that a little bit?
Well, yeah, his father was very strict in a lot of ways, and he just didn't allow back talk and this kind of thing. And his mother was the opposite. So he came from a place of anything goes to, oops, only this part goes. So that was part of the chafing that went on. And he and his father did get into a big argument one night. And so I think that kind of clinched things.
Now, he did attend your wedding, Mark.
Yes.
As I do recall, you gave us some great pictures for a PowerPoint presentation we put together, and it looked like a very, put together family there with you, Michael, the children. So he moves back to the mainland and attends high school, goes to his prom. During that time frame, is it when Stacy was violated?
No, she was violated at a very young age. It's just that we found out about it during that time period.
You found out about it, okay.
Now, what he knew, he never offered anything except after the fact. I said, why didn't you tell your father about this when it happened? And he said, well, it was almost like, well, I guess it didn't happen to him, and he was young, and it didn't sink in that this was a horrible thing to have happen to his sister. But then I've explained all of her behavior.
All of Stacy's behavior?
All of Stacy's behavior, yeah.
How did she behave?
Well, as I said, she was rebellious, so that all contributed. So, she was. She would go out and stay out. She would run away from home. She would, do those kinds of things.
Do you think she might have confided in Michael, and that's why she kind of resented him a little bit, that nothing was done earlier?
I really wouldn't know about that. I mean, she didn't obviously confide. His own wife didn't even tell him. I mean, they were married at the time. She knew. So I don't know how that contributed to things.
So that seems to be one thing that haunts Mark Sievers to this day, especially when I would visit him in jail interviews, was his sister being raped by a neighbor at a young age. So I don't know if he puts that blame on himself or not from what happened, but he probably certainly thinks about it now being older and sees how, he should have came forward maybe when he was younger.
Yeah. I would assume that later when he became mature and realized what his sister went through, that he understood it better, and he always felt like he should protect his sisters. He was always getting in the face of their boyfriends and saying, now,
So,
don't act this way.
So how long was it when he went back to the U.S.? Did you come and visit him with Michael, Mark's father?
Well, we were there in the Caribbean for about 18 months, and they were gone maybe 4 or 5 months. We came back briefly, and then we went to England. And Scott came with us to England. Mark did not.
And Mark stayed behind. Why did Mark stay behind?
He wanted to finish his high school and graduate from his high school. But he had 2 high schools that he'd been going to by this time, the one in our school district and the one in his mother's school district. So he's told me that he graduated from both, but I don't know how that's possible. But his diploma's from Parkway High School.
Oh, nice. So during this time, did you notice any changes in Mark's behavior? Did you notice that any sadness? Or did you notice that his life was starting to come back together?
He seemed pretty, by the time we got back from England, he seemed pretty mature and on another course. While we were gone, he did kind of bail out of college. Nothing bad happened to him. He just wasn't ready for it, I don't think. So he said, well, I guess I'll pay my way. And he started, after we'd come back from England, he did. He paid his way through college, the rest of his college, which was a couple of years. And then he paid his way through nursing school.
I know one of the things that talking to him hurt him very much was that your husband had passed away and was not able to see Mark's graduation. an accomplishment that he was able to achieve. And I think it was during the same year, more or less, that happened.
Very well could have been. I was so disoriented at that time. Things don't really make a lot of sense back then. Trying to remember. That was some of the first times that I created some blank spots in my memory from, I don't know whether it was from age or just from the pain and suffering.
Was Mark's father's death all of the sudden, or was it an illness that slowly got together and
Well, it was kind of both, because when he found out he had cancer of the pancreas, it was all of a sudden, because it was diagnosed all of a sudden. He'd kept his symptoms quiet from all of us, his suspicions. In hindsight, I see there were a couple of hints he was dropping, but at the time we were very busy because he was, ending his internships and so forth. And after, what was it, 6 or 7 years of all this, well, we were going to move to a different town and he was going to set up a practice. So all of a sudden, we find out that he's got pancreatic cancer, and that's not something you survive. That's, I don't know, less than 1% do, or 2%, something very small.
how many months was it when you found out
So
that he passed away?
it was about 9 months.
About 9 months.
About 9 months, and it was, a slow decline, and we tried to do what everybody does, make it as full of life events as you can make it.
So Mark's older sister, she had went on to college at the time, and Stacy had moved on. And eventually Stacy met with Teresa, and I guess they were doing a thing together for a while.
Yeah.
And did you ever meet Teresa when she was with Stacy, or no?
No, I never saw them together. I think maybe it was in hindsight that I found out that they knew each other, actually. So they had become friends. By this time, Stacy had turned her life around. She went to school and became acupuncturist, and she was doing quite well. Owned a couple of properties and whatnot, and had a lifetime partner. So I didn't know that much about their relationship.
So when you say a lifetime partner, that's the same sex?
Yes, it was.
Same sex, okay.
Yeah, I met them both several times. When we came to Florida, I had an aunt that lived here seasonally, and I visited her and drug Mike along with me.
And Bonnie actually has a wonderful partner, same-sex partner now.
Yes.
They're a beautiful couple, but it's the same sex that she's with now as well. And Stacy ended up introducing Mark to Teresa. Is that correct?
Yes, I think Mark needed some help. He'd had a bad fall at his work. He worked for the casinos in St. Louis, and he'd had a bad fall, hit his head, and he was continuing to have headaches. So I think Stacy introduced him. He'd by that time come down visiting his sister, visiting me, and he'd bought a property here and was sort of living both places, St. Louis and Florida.
So I remember you gave us a bunch of IDs from his, I guess he was a dealer in the casinos in Las Vegas when he took his fall and stuff like that. But do you remember what his nickname was?
Yeah, Smiley.
And that was because he was always happy and smiling in the pictures.
Even as a child, he was very upbeat, and he still is. He's very upbeat, no matter what he's going through.
How old was he when his sister Stacy passed away? And that was from Graves' disease, I believe?
Yes, I think so.
Did you ever verify that from a death certificate or anything?
I think so. Yeah, I did see her death certificate, so I think I did. Okay. I just know it was like an adrenal. There's several diseases you can get, so I'm not sure which one it was, but...
How bad was he affected by it, and how close was he with Stacy at the time?
Well, since he'd been coming to Florida and visiting her, I think they developed a closer relationship. And, they had this house and real estate flipping enterprises that they were interested in doing. Stacy had bought several properties and turned them for profits and kept some for rentals. And so Mark started doing the same thing. So I wasn't around them, but they seemed to have gotten back together again, a closeness.
So Mark, once he met Teresa, from what we understand, it was kind of like love at first sight. That was a relationship that just kind of increased as the days went on, as they met, and eventually they were having, I guess, unprotected sex, according to Mark, and they had their first child. The first child name was?
That was Josephine.
That was Josephine.
Mm-hmm.
And they eventually moved down here to Bonita Springs, and they get a house in Bonita Springs. Now, did you live in Naples when they moved in together there?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, I did.
How often would you visit Mark and Teresa?
Not too often. They were very busy people. Teresa's a very busy person, and they had pretty structured life. And couple of times we tried to get together. I don't know, a couple times a year probably, even though we were closer. We were just didn't. Things didn't fit together. Timing didn't work, I guess.
And what about the holidays, like Thanksgiving, Christmas?
We were never big on celebrating the holidays, but yeah, we tried Thanksgiving and Christmas and things like that.
Would that be at your house or their house?
At my house. They'd come a couple times. My aunt and uncle lived in the Keys, and so it's not too far for them to come for it. And some of their friends from St. Louis would come.
And I do recall you had mentioned one Thanksgiving where I think the kids at a very young age were vegetarians. And that was during a Thanksgiving?
Yeah, they brought their own food. It's basically what it was.
How old were they at the time?
Oh, my. I think Carmi, the youngest, was just a toddler. And so, yeah, they were not really school age yet, I don't think, then.
And how close were you as the relationship moved later on, with years as the kids started growing up?
Well, Mark he was better at keeping in touch than I was, we'll put it that way. He really treasured family, and not surprisingly, he made the effort to keep everyone connected. So he would call. He was a great one for calling, and we would get together that way.
So Mark mentions a couple instances where he kind of felt it was normal that one of the daughters, I guess she was 9 at the time, would walk around without a shirt on, and he would like laugh at her little buds coming out. Did you witness some of that? Because I think he had mentioned that it was during one Thanksgiving that somebody got mad at him and for allowing that to happen.
I don't remember that incident, but no, I don't ever remember. They came in their swimsuits one time and we were swimming, but I don't remember them without a shirt on. I do know that he told me about an event where his sister-in-law got perturbed about it. And he and Teresa just weren't, they were just not like that. You know, that it wasn't a sexual thing with them. They were children to them, and what's not natural about a child's body, so.
Because Mark talks about how Teresa would walk around the house naked, and then the older child was kind of like mimicking that at times.
That could be. She's a very good mimicker.
Do you recall a time that Children's and Families stepped in and interviewed the children?
I remember Mark telling me about that he, was at the library once. I mean, this was after Teresa had died. And the children were, I don't know why he had them at the library. They did that often. He took them all kinds of places. But they were at the library, and, yeah, Children's Family Services came and took the children out. And wouldn't let Mark see them, wouldn't let there be any any adult presence that Mark was familiar with or knew a person. He felt that they were being kidnapped. And they were interviewed then, taken and interviewed, and that was very upsetting to him. Yes, it was.
So leading up to Teresa's death, did you ever see Mark and Teresa arguing at all?
Just one time, it wasn't really an argument, it was more like a dressing down. Teresa yelled at Mark because the daughter was jumping around and fell, and he failed to protect her from falling. After all her gymnastics, she is a very active child.
Did you notice Mark being very protective with the children?
Oh, yes.
In which way?
Well, he never allowed me to babysit them.
Did you ask, or he just said no to
I
this?
said, yeah, they could come and visit, or, why don't they stay for the day or whatever. No, no, he had to make sure that they had their correct food, and he didn't want them to be a burden to anyone. He's always concerned about other people and how what he did would affect them.
Did you ever see him carrying the older daughter on his hip and the other one in his arms?
I don't remember. Probably.
One of the neighbors would say that he always had the children in tight arms and would even go on the roof to play cards and stuff with them. Kind of
Yeah.
like a protection type of thing.
Well, he liked to do innovative things with the kids, and the kids, that time he got on the roof, the kids said, "Oh, Daddy, why can't we get on the roof and do this?" And he said, "Oh, well, okay." And I think Teresa actually joined him on that. I asked him about that later. And he said, yeah, Teresa even came up with us and played cards. It was just something fun for them to do with the kids.
So when they went on vacation, that final vacation, were you aware they were leaving town?
I was vaguely aware that they were going somewhere. I didn't know the specifics, but I knew it was that weekend. And because I think I had asked Mark if he needed someone to take care of the animals for him.
And what did he tell you?
He said his mom was going to do that. And she and Melanie lived closer to where he lived. Not a lot closer, but closer, so
So he sounded normal.
sounded fine.
And then he goes on vacation with the family. When did you get the call that Teresa was murdered?
Well, I didn't get a call. All I got was coming home from work, was watching the television, and news was on, happened to be on, and I saw the front of his house. And then the next thing I saw was a stretcher being pulled out, a body with a cover over it, and I'm like, what happened here? And so I started calling people. Well, I guess first person I called was Bonnie, I think it was, and she wouldn't say anything. She said, I can't say anything. So evidently, finding out later, the police right away told them, don't talk to anybody, don't say anything. So she wouldn't even tell me. So I called Scott, Mark's brother, and he said, well, we're not supposed to talk about it yet, and blah, blah, blah. So
Where was Scott living at the time?
St. Louis.
So when did you finally discover it was Teresa?
I don't really remember, but I think the more new, it was on the news quite a bit, and so I don't know. It was, well, it had to have been just a couple of days.
Did you talk to Mark after?
I did at some point. I talked to him briefly. He was so choked up he could not get the words out.
Did you see him after?
I did not see him because he was still in where they were, New York, Connecticut. And then they came home shortly thereafter, and then they were planning the funeral. And I wasn't a part of any of that. He was at Bonnie's house, and all kinds of people were coming and going, and I tried to stay out of the way because just too much going on.
Did you go to the funeral?
Yes, I did.
And what did you observe at the funeral?
It was long, for one thing. I don't know, we were there for like 4 hours. There was how they do now, television in the background with Life of Teresa on it, which was sad enough. At some point, Curtis Wright was there with his wife Angie and asked if I remembered them, and of course I said yes, I did, and they were all very kind and everything. I went into the dress, I guess you'd call it a dressing room. There was a side room to talk to Mark when I first went in. He showed me that he had a gun on him, and I said, "What's that for?" And he said, "Well, we feel like that the girl's life might be in danger." And later I found out that his daughters asked him to carry 2 guns to protect them.
Because they were afraid of what happened to the mother.
Yes. He said, "I've got 1 gun." And they said, "Well, Daddy, you should have 2 guns."
So when did you find out that Mark was arrested?
I was at work, and it was whenever that was, February, I expect. That was quite a few months afterwards. And my boss came in and said, "Your son's just been arrested." And we were expecting it, actually.
Why?
We were for a long time, because you could see the trajectory, the way everything was pointing. And of course, it was Mark's best friend that admitted to doing this. Of course, not until right before they arrested him did he do the admitting, but as soon as he gave them the statement that they wanted, Mr. Wright, we always called him Wayne, not Curtis, but anyway.
How did that impact you when you found out Wayne Wright killed Teresa?
I couldn't process it. I didn't understand why. I still don't understand why he would do such a thing. I've got a theory, but I don't know why.
And what's your theory?
Well, he got in some kind of an argument with her. He's known to have, at least I was told that he hit other women. So I knew that in the back of my mind. I didn't think maybe he was a wife beater or anything, but I knew that. And I just think that he lost his temper for whatever reason. Now, recently, the other guy in the case, Jimmy Rogers, has said as much. And he said, you know, he went there basically, and he was told that he was needed to drive Curtis there because Curtis had blackout spells. And so he came to help, and when they arrived and Teresa arrived, she was angry, and all he heard was an argument. And with his head injuries, the only thing I can figure is that he lost his temper. Picked up the nearest thing, which happened to be a hammer, and hit her.
So the trial's happening, and Mark Sievers is on trial. And prior to that, I get to meet you.
Yes.
Doing the investigation on mitigation, trying to find some mitigating factors that, what would drive an individual to commit a murder for hire like this on his wife with children. Of course, our role is a little bit different. Our role is to try to see the guilt and what contributing factors would have contributed to his behavior up until the point of the murder. So all those factors that we had talked about earlier, the sister Stacy being sexual violated when she was very young, the divorce with his parents, the moving away from his mothers and sisters, the moving to an island, coming back, the sister actually having an affair with his wife that he was later introduced to. All those are kind of contributing factors which would make him very possessive of the kids and the children and not want any separation from him and Teresa if they were having marital problems, which we don't believe they were, but those would all be contributing factors towards his behavior. So now we're at the trial, and how shocked were you when the guilty verdict came in?
I guess I wasn't really shocked.
And why is that?
Because the news media had already crucified him. And after all, that's the public. And yeah.
Now, you were a crusader all the way out from the time of his arrest to the time of trial. That was like, what, 4 years almost? I think he was there during the trial. And
Sure was 4 years.
yeah. And a crusader meaning that you would visit him on a weekly basis, you and Bonnie, and you were kind of his support system while he was in jail and detention center here. And, he was kind of put in solitary confinement because he was in a cell by himself.
Yes. Yes, he was. And yes, I did visit him weekly.
What would he tell you during your visits?
Oh, he would just tell me we would talk about the old times, or we would talk about the case coming up. You can't talk too much about the case coming up because you're monitored. Any phone calls in and out, and your visits, which our visits aren't face-to-face, they're over a television.
Would you go the same time as his mother, Bonnie, or would you go on separate days?
No, we would go separate days. There were only, I think, 2 days then. I can't remember what the rules were then, but and you had to, put in for an appointment and what hours you would be there, and there was only a certain time frame. And so we split up the time that was available.
How shocked were you after the verdict and the sentencing hearing came in that they gave him the death penalty?
That was a lot more shocking in a way, but it seemed extraordinarily cruel that they would not worry about a man who is actually able to hit someone in the head with a hammer, and as versus what they thought was a man who just asked his wife to be killed. I mean, the two acts seem a little bit different to me. And so to know that this man, well, he's already served 7 years, so, he'll be out in somebody's lifetime, some of these people's lifetime, and be a menace to the world.
I could never understand that part as well. Being a police officer with the city of Miami for 30 years, you kind of take it from like the lowest extreme. Like suppose you're driving and your person next to you says, go ahead and take the red light. Don't worry about it. Go through the red light.
Yeah.
You go through the red light, a policeman stops you. Well, my friend, told me to go through the red light because he was late on an appointment. But yet you're not going to give a ticket to his friend. You're going to give it to the driver. So in an instance like this, taking it to the far extreme,
Yeah.
You're giving the ticket to the driver because you're giving him a death penalty on something like you said. If he is guilty, he doesn't have the heart to do it. I hate to say it, but he's doing it for the protection of his children, what he believes is the protection of his children. No evidence other than just circumstantial evidence. There was no DNA, no direct text messages saying, let's kill her, let's do this, let's do that. Life insurance policies that they had in place were in place for several years. So it does, with that little doubt in the air, seems kind of like a heavy burden to put a death penalty on somebody when the person that took the hammer and admitted to smashing her head in is out in 20 years, like you said, and probably good behavior, maybe 12 to 15 years, for taking that action. I think he should have as well got the death penalty. And that kind of leaves a doubt also because saving his own skin type of saying he could be making up this murder for hire thing. And there could be all kind of factors involved.
Sure.
What did you think about Curtis Wainwright when he started to take on the same image as Mark, as far as the facial features and looking exactly like Mark?
I just think it was a joke to them. I mean, I don't think it was intentional. I mean, they kind of got a kick out of it, being like twins would kind of get a kick out of fooling people and think it's funny. But I don't think they did it on purpose. I really don't.
And you were never aware of their lifestyle, meaning like the swinging lifestyle that Mark had and Teresa had?
No, Mark one time began to ask me questions about what if this or that. And I said, no, I don't want to know that much detail about your life. You're a grown person, you know, and you shouldn't tell your mother these things. Just the way
Well,
I
what did
felt
he
about
tell
it.
you?
I just knew that he was going to get into something about, well, what, what if somebody, I don't really remember the conversation. I just knew where we were headed, I guess.
Motherly advice, I guess he was looking for.
I guess he was. I think he was reluctant about going into it and wondered what I thought about it. He was a good one for asking advice. He was good at also taking advice, not taking offense if you, even when his father would berate him on occasion, he didn't take offense at it. Or the time that I noticed that Teresa yelled at him, which was very, to me, would have been very demeaning, and he just laughed it off. It didn't really bother him for whatever reason.
So I'm sure even Mark, even though it didn't go quite like he planned, I remember sitting in front of Mark at the jail when he was found guilty, and I was like, "Did you ever think of what do you want? Mark, do you want life in prison, or do you want the death penalty? Do you want to be put in a cell with somebody else with life in prison versus being in solitary confinement and having a room to yourself?" And he's like, "Gee, I never really thought of it that way." I said, "Well, these are questions that you need to try to plant the seed that if he is sent to death row, there's a little up factor, to it. I hate to say it that way, but there is." So now he gets convicted. He gets sentenced to death, off to death row, Florida. Correct? What's the name of the prison?
UCI, Union Correctional Facility.
So tell us about your first visit there.
Well, that's always interesting, isn't it? You have to prepare ahead of time, of course, and put in your application, which his sister and his brother have been refused.
Why is that?
I don't know. There is no explanations that come from the government. You don't ask them questions.
And which sister? Your
Jamie's. No, my daughter did go with me in May.
and Jamie also, just so our viewers know, she went through a divorce.
She did, yes.
And she kind of has some mental instability where she was seeing a psychiatrist as well for a while.
Yes, she was.
So do you know what that instability was about?
No, I don't. She had some eating disorder when she was a teenager. So, as I understand it, that's indicative of, something going on and not going right. So I don't know if it's a chemical process or a mental process entirely. I don't know.
Just another contributing factor towards mitigation on Mark's upbringing. Another problem with another sister.
Yeah.
All this kind of like
Yeah, somebody that he was trying to protect, or he felt he should, and he still kind of tries to protect her from his location now. Yeah, I mean, they do get to talk, but she's been denied entrance. I don't know whether she filled out the form wrong or what. And I recently found out that his brother, just recently, was denied.
His brother Scott?
Yes.
No idea why.
It could be because he had a marijuana possession in his youth, a charge, and on the form that you fill out to visit, you have to say whether you've ever been arrested. Well, what does that mean? Been arrested? Does that mean you have a record, or, I don't know.
Well, that seems
So it might be
harsh.
just technical. Might be a technicality, but that's the rules that the prison has. Now, maybe he put down no, for instance, that he had never been arrested, and they checked his record, and he found out he had, and so they didn't like it because it was a lie. I have no idea.
So when you visit him, is he around other inmates that are just on death row, or is he amongst the general population on the visiting?
No, he's in a special building with just death row inmates, and when we visit, there's a room with these stainless steel picnic tables and a couple of guards, and there are, several of the death row inmates are visiting with their families at a time, maybe 18 15, 20, something like that.
Did you get to meet any of them?
I've met a couple of them, yes.
And how was that? Just Mark introducing you to them?
Yes.
What
And
were they? What were their crimes, if you could remember?
well, we're not supposed to check up on that. According to the prison system, that's not something you're supposed to do. So we didn't.
So it's not like Mark said, "Oh, here's my friend Tom, an axe murderer."
Right.
It didn't happen like that.
No.
No, it didn't. Okay. So when you said it's kind of like unique and unusual, so your first visit there, you're actually not behind something, right? You're in a room with everybody.
That was the first time in 4 years that I got to give him a hug. Yeah. And you're
How
only
meaningful was that?
very meaningful. It was very meaningful because the first thing you want to do with your child when they have been hurt, when they've been arrested, you want to hug them. And I hadn't been able to do that.
I see it's bringing tears to your eyes a little bit. So you're kind of regressing back to that moment you got to hug him
Yeah.
after 4 years.
Yeah.
So besides you visiting Mark, Bonnie has went also, his mother, on several occasions, correct?
Yes. As far as I know.
And what about your daughter?
And my daughter and I went together in May. I think it was this past May.
So she was approved. She had no problem.
True. Yeah, she was approved. So we went together, and that was good for Connie. She's very, very attached to Mark. I mean, he's been her big brother, although he's younger than her. He just takes on that role of protector.
Just so our listener and viewers know, Bonnie, his mother, can't really talk to us at this time because they have another attorney, and they advised her not to talk to the media or any other personnel, even though we had several interviews prior to the sentencing and prior to the end of the trial. So now COVID hits. You get to see your son after 4 years, and boom, COVID hits.
Yeah, I think I had a couple of visits before that. COVID, yeah. And it's a process getting in there anyway, but yeah, they stopped visits for a while, and then they had visits, but you had to be behind they put up these plastic shields on the middle of the picnic table so you couldn't have contact, and you had to wear a mask and the shield. So you're both in mask and a shield, and you're trying to talk, and it's getting louder and louder around you because all these other people are in there trying to talk. And you can't, especially Mark and I, we both have little hearing deficiencies, and you're muffled, and it was very difficult. But we did manage a visit right after they lifted the COVID restrictions.
But still not in person. It's behind a shield.
Yes, it was behind a makeshift shield.
So when was the last time you got to hug him?
That was in May. I mean, just recently, in June. I went, yeah.
When do you plan on going back?
Oh, yes. I've managed to visit almost averaged once a month.
So every month. How far a drive is it from here?
It's 5 hours, a good 5 hours. So usually I'll spend the night. It's too much to drive.
Get a hotel while you're out there.
Yes. And especially if you want to make the most of your hours and start when they first open. So you want to be there early in the morning. You can, I think it's 9 o'clock they open. And you can go in there and, you can have lunch together. They've got a little microwave oven and little frozen foods you can put in the microwave, and a soda machine and a snack machine. So in a way you can have lunch with them if you like.
And when you talk to Mark, does he tell you how life is behind bars on death row?
Not too much. Anything that comes out that somebody hears you say is not going to be liked, and that could cause you more trouble.
Not going to be liked by the prison system, correct?
Yes, or another inmate if his family finds out about it and tells him, I guess. If you say the wrong thing, or, at first he had issues because of his ethnicity, his Jewishness. He had a little bit of issues. Some of them felt that he was a child molester for some reason and child molesters are segregated out somehow. So we had little scuffles here and there. I hope they weren't serious, but he won't talk about them.
So you were saying when they found out that he was Jewish, that he was having problems. What kind of problems?
I don't know. He didn't specify. He just said that they took him aside and said something like, well, we can beat you up anytime or something like that.
And this was inmates or guards?
That time was inmate.
I do recall when he was down here in the prison down here in Naples area, Fort Myers actually, that they were putting wood chips in his food.
He had found some, yes, in some of his food. Found some interesting things like that. So I don't know if that was just an accident, because sometimes you do, because it's a commercial food delivery, of course, so who knows.
Well, we certainly thank you for your time today, and continue being his support system.
I will.
'Cause you're all he's got, you and Bonnie and the family. I can imagine that he looks forward to your visits and your phone calls.
I'm sure. We do too.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. If you want to support us, keep this true crime series going, then get on the Amazon bookstore and purchase The Mitigation of Mark Sievers, Till Death Do Us Part by me, Jeffrey Giordano. So if you like our show, comment, hit the like button, and subscribe, or you may be the next one we investigate. You can follow us, Gotham Investigations, on Instagram, TikTok, or me, Jeffrey Giordano, on Facebook or Tweety Bird.